Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I am your host, Mariology here, and there is still construction work going on outside, which might add some ambient sound effects to this reading. This is why I am an anti-feminist, part 5. Back in 2016, a video made the rounds through the commentator communities of YouTube, and beyond. This would be the ridiculous, goddamned awful, horribly brain-dead, superficial as a Valley Girl video 36 questions women have for men. If you have not seen it yet, you should. Go watch it now. I'll have coffee, wine and strange and exotic pharmaceuticals waiting for you when you come back. It is safe to say that, if this video was a child, it would be referred to as having a face that only a mother could love. It would be caught trying to smoke its own socks in one and only gender-neutral toilet in its school, because the cool kids told it that this is what the cool kids do. It is that one kid that everyone knows should really be getting special education, but who does not for some reason or other, mainly to do with its parents. In other words, it is ridiculous, stupid, mentally and emotionally challenged. It should be locked up for its own protection, in a padded cell with a straitjacket and a bottle of finely aged antipsychotics, its tongue tied down so it did not accidentally swallow it and subsequently choke to death. Of course, this child would have already choked on its own sense of self-importance, slipped on its own dribble and landed straight on its ass. Which is to say, it would slip on its pride and land on its honor. I really and truly enjoyed watching it being torn to shreds by everything and everyone able to get their wonderful hands and biting tongues on it. Though it is, without a doubt, low-hanging fruit. Sometimes, that is just exactly what one needs. I am not going to beat a dead horse and respond to that video. We should really leave it alone. It is already dead. And oh the humanity, oh the woe and oh the torture never ends. I'm just using it as a necessary tool, an introduction to this part of my cruel and unusual rambling. It is incredibly funny to me, bordering on hilarious, that the supposedly oppressed class can speak to their supposed oppressors like the women in that video did, that is, with impunity. It is almost as though women are most definitely not oppressed and men are certainly not their oppressors. That these nincompoops are unable to see this is something I am absolutely unwilling to believe. No one can be that stupid, that lacking in self-awareness, and still be able to breathe and stand at the same time. They know they are not being oppressed. They are riding the gravy train of self-important smugness, arrogance, and the incredible sensation that their shit don't stink. High on their own fumes of moral indignation and self-righteous imbecility, they know themselves and their ideology to be considered untouchable by the culture at large. Were women as oppressed as these fools claim, they would never have dared to make this video for fear of the bogeyman patriarchy smashing down on them with all the fascist jackboots and cruel whips it could muster. Strange how that did not happen. Of course, cue the inevitable calls and cries of misogynist harassment and patriarchal interference for people responding to their video in which they do nothing but insult, condescend, stereotype and belittle men in the name of holy feminism and her cohort gynocentrism. The self-perpetuating and self-fulfilling prophecy has come full circle. Women can say whatever the hell they like about men in general, and if men dare respond, well now, that is an outrage and absolute proof that what they are saying is true as well as the necessity of the movement. Add to this the chronic case of the one rule for me, another for thee sickness, and you've got yourself Feminism 101. Though I am not going to respond to the video, I will take one quote from the video as a starting point, paraphrasing it a bit. Why do you make women talk about men in movies when you can sit around and talk about boobs for hours? End quote. Men are just as women are, not a grey, homogeneous ooze. The actions of one man are not the actions of every man in existence. It is also incredibly funny that this is, in fact, a video where women do nothing but talk about men, or talk down to men, whatever you want to call it, which kind of disproves that point a little. Which only makes me think that anything a feminist claims that men do is something she does herself. It is psychological projection from someone who is incapable of understanding that other people act differently to herself. Now, to be fair, I believe we are all guilty of psychological projection in some way or other. The only reference point we have are, after all, ourselves. So it would be fairly natural to assume other people react or act in a manner similar to us. More so for people who have problems with empathy, if I understand correctly. It is, however, something that one can learn not to do. This involves introspection and an understanding that oneself is not a blueprint for humanity, though, and this is clearly something that does not come easily to the feminist hive mind in the garden of voluptuous hysteria, or aboard the gravy train of grace and hubris. For my own sake, I cannot remember the last time I discussed boobs with any one of my friends. Granted, I discuss boobs with my wife from time to time, but that tend to be because she brought it up after seeing boobs in the Bada Bing scenes from The Sopranos and commenting on the terrible boob jobs. And yeah, they are fairly terrible. You know, boobs may be great and all, but it really is not an interesting topic of discussion. Sorry, ladies. Besides, I have always been more a fan of legs than I have ever been of boobs. Legs are far better than boobs, and I will happily fight anyone who says otherwise. Or I will offer them a pint of my finest homebrew and make them see the error of their ways. Whichever may come first. I can only assume that what women, in particular feminist women, do when they are alone is talk about men and nothing but that. Either that, or they are terrified that men do not talk about women when men are alone together. There can be no other topics of importance or interest for men than women, right? Cock-a-doodle-doo. You know, I have received unsolicited tit pics on Snapchat, back in the days when I was dumb enough to use it. To which I responded that I have always enjoyed legs far better than I have ever enjoyed tits. This did not get me any response. Probably should have called the cops on them for sexual harassment, come to think of it. But oh well. TNA aside, what I am rambling my way towards is this. Feminism often make the claim that men oppose feminism, because feminism focuses on women. To which I would dare say that it is quite the contrary. The main point of contention is that feminism focuses so very much on the perceived evil of men. So much so that it borders on obsession, a grotesque display of obsession. Like some frenzied, mad ex-girlfriend that cannot understand the meaning of the words "leave me alone, you crazy person." Feminism lays the burden of blame and shame on men for being men. It does so all the time. It has the worst, the lowest opinion of men, painting us all as terrible oppressors, misogynistic bastards and so forth and so on, for nothing but being born as boys, for growing up and becoming men. At the same time, feminism tend to call on men to rise up and do all we can to make the world a better place. For women. Men must give and sacrifice so that women shall feel safe. From other men, and if men do not do that, men are shamed by feminism, and by society at large. Men are disposable tools to be used for the betterment of society, for the safety of women and for the safety of children. Chivalry is not dead, and feminism, with all its claims of equal treatment, are the ones keeping it alive, whenever it suits them. Traditional expectations where gender roles are concerned is still a thing when it comes to the expectations we put on men, to protect and to provide, and most men, I am willing to bet, do this quite willingly. It gives a sense of purpose that is much needed in the lives of boys and men. This is something men have done for millennia. I don't think this is something we will ever get rid of, despite men walking away, despite MGTOW, despite all that jazz. It seems to be something we are biologically hardwired to do. Now, we have grown smart enough as a species to be able to make conscious decisions to walk away, to work on ourselves, to be aware of how we interact with society. And with that I mean all of society, not only men, not only women. This is, in all honesty, all well and good. More power to you. I find myself turning my back on society more and more in my own way. At some point I really just got tired of all the shit-flinging, imbecility and hypocrisy on display in the public discourse. Civility is dead. All that is left is civil disobedience, and that is a misplaced, poorly managed, never thought through parody of civil disobedience from sheltered nincompoops who do not really understand the what, how, when, where, why and such. Everything has become so scathingly, so eye-scaringly black and white. It is either this, or it is that. Opposition to this must as such necessarily mean complete allegiance to that. I often wonder if this is due to our dwindling and very limited concentration spans, making concentrating on something for a prolonged period of time a difficult prospect for most. This giving rise to merely a surface understanding of various issues. It is easy to point at one thing and claim that this one thing is what needs to be fixed. Then, and only then, all of this and all of that will be in perfect order. And then one could probably argue that this is exactly what I am doing when I focus so much of my writing and ramblings on the forces of feminism. To which I can only reply that I have a lot of things to get out of my system where feminism is regarded before I feel, and here the emphasis is, I absolutely admit, on the word feel, ready to tackle other issues. I consider it very dangerous when one ideology, when one set of ideas are given the monopoly on any one concept. Particularly so in regards to such a strange and ever-changing concept as equality. More voices should be heard than only the one, and feminism have become so mighty, so big and powerful that it is able to quite successfully kill other voices attempting to speak on the topic. That is a dangerous thing. This is something I would say no matter which set of ideas are granted a monopoly, to be perfectly honest. Particularly so if this set of ideas have the power to shut down voices in opposition. Any ism that shames and threatens other voices into silence or compliance or obedience is dangerous. Protesting is one thing, refusing people to listen to other voices is quite another. This black and white thinking is the price to pay for immediate satisfaction through immediate outrage, and facts and nuance be damned. Though I am obviously not a MGTOW, being a married man and all, I absolutely understand where it comes from. The best one can do is to carve out a space for oneself, to follow one's own path towards happiness and self-fulfillment. Which feminism consider wise words to give to women, but horrible words to give to men. For, to the eyes of feminism, and to a sure and certain extent society as is, if a man does not make the betterment of women's lives his main priority, he is not a real man. That is putting it very simple, obviously. If there is anything we ought to have learned by now, it is this. The only ones allowed to judge whether a man is a real man or not are women as a group, not men, and most certainly not the man being scrutinized at that moment in time. That is the level of insanity we are at. There are more than enough books, articles, lectures, and so on such out there by women telling men what to do in order to be a real man, which tend to be what the one woman want to see in a man, and never mind the men themselves. Men are there for their amusement and their convenience. This is some supreme entitlement driven forth and weaponized by the frantic forces of feminism. It is not without reason that the word boy used to refer to a servant. Just get the boy to do it. See what I mean? As an example, it is a constant source of amusement to me that men are still expected to pay on dates. Scores of women get offended if they are expected to split the bill. No strong independent women to be seen there, I gather. Some fish most certainly need a bicycle. At the very least where dates are concerned. This is a traditional expectation. And though I am very much aware that there are women out there who do pay for dates or split the bills, they are in the minority. And to be clear, how people choose to delegate responsibilities in their personal relationships is their business and their business alone. I have no interest in meddling, nor should anyone else. My point is only this. One cannot expect one side to fulfill the traditional expectations, and then be outraged when the traditional role is expected from the other side. One must give in order to receive. This goes for both parties. There is this interview with Emma Watson, she of the hypocritical he for she funk and flurry on YouTube, in which she magically and majestically swirls triumphantly through the garden of mental gymnastics to explain why she still expects men to pay on dates, despite feminism, equal treatment and so and such, and despite being filthy, stinking rich herself. The traditional roles are very much alive and well where men are concerned, but it is not to be reciprocated in kind. If you want a woman to fulfill a traditional role, you are a misogynistic bastard. You, however, must fulfill a traditional role. If not, you are a misogynistic bastard. For that is equality as seen through the eyes and bleeding gums of feminism. Supreme entitlement. Because men owe women ever so much and yada 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 blah blah blah. And you want to be seen as a real man, do you not? And a real man does whatever the hell a woman and society says he must do, at the cost of his own safety, sanity, life, limb and economy. This real man rhetoric is complete and utter shit. A real man is a real man if he says he is a real man, and he does whatever the hell he wants to do, shame and ridicule be damned. Whether that shame and ridicule comes from women or from other men should not matter. Rise above the self-flagellating and self-sacrificial bullshit and do your thing, whatever that thing is. I was bullied for reading books when I went to school. Literature is one of my first and greatest loves, one of my greatest pleasures in life. Always have been and always will be. Apparently, this is not something real men do, whatever the hell this means. Granted, I was singled out for bullying, so whatever I did would get me bullied. This one stuck out the most to me, because there is something precious and special about some imbecilic moron with the vocabulary of a toddler proudly boasting about never having read a book in his life, ridiculing and belittling someone for reading books, referring to the practice as stupid. Stupid. Maybe I'm expecting too much from kids aged 16, but god damn if that is not some ridiculous piss-pottery. It must also be mentioned, mainly for my own amusement, that the girls were not particularly interested in leaving a party and going home with someone whose main accomplishment in life was having a complete collection of Dostoevsky and Jens Bjørneboe on his shelf. Can't say that I blame them. I am very much aware that I am a boring, introverted social fuck-up with all the charisma of a wet and well-worn sock. I was, however, led to believe that women and girls both preferred intelligence to brutishness, calm mannerisms to toxic masculinity, a cultured mind to a fornicating mind, and so and such. Now, had I owned a car or a motorcycle on the other hand, in other words being able to provide something of value, there is this constant bombardment of messages aimed at boys and men, mainly from women, and more often than not feminist women, about how men are supposed to be and act and do and think and behave and not behave and live and love and fuck and breathe and eat and die. And the messages are self-contradictory more often than they are not, unreasonable at the best of times, and completely and utterly shining, burning and flashing with entitlement. In particular when taking into account that men cannot say a single goddamned thing about women and how women should be, or for that matter what kind of woman they want to share their lives with, without being rained on by the great and glorious feminist brigade, and any and all woman and simpering white knight in the immediate vicinity of your tweet or twatter or private conversation in a public space. I have been verbally harangued many a time in public by self-proclaimed feminists who believe they have the God-given right to charge in on any and all private conversation and private relationship if they don't like what they hear or see, or believe that they hear or see. Entitlement. Thy name is feminism. If you don't believe me, try telling the world that you, as a man, want a traditional marriage where the woman stays at home and you provide, and see what that gives you. Conversely, and for amusement, try saying that you, as a man, want to stay at home and expect your wife to provide for you and the family, to be the main breadwinner as it were. Both are equally wrong and terrifying, signs of misogyny and toxic masculinity and whatnot and what do's and what don'ts, what? Kyle's mom will always be a bitch, no matter how self-righteous. The inverse applies as well. If a woman wants to stay at home, the feminist brigade will submit their opinions on her poor choices in life whether she wants to hear them or not. There's not a single coherent message delivered. There's only the messages, the constant bombardment, that men and boys must do this, do that, do the other stuff, even when that contradicts the previous stuff. It is never good enough, for there is always something to bitch and moan and complain about where men are concerned. I am aware that many of these articles written about what men must do, need to do and so are written by different people with different views. This is not the point. Or, well, were I playing the collectivist blame game that feminism plays, it would be the point. And that is exactly the point. Feminism plays the game of collectivism and tribalism, where men are one group and women another group. Therefore, anything one man does reflects on every other man. The reverse do not apply. Anything one woman does is her actions and does not reflect on every other woman, when it suits feminism. Any one man is representative of men, any one woman is representative of herself and herself only, when it suits the powers that be. So that painting all women with a broad brush is terrible behavior, and painting all men with a broad brush is expected, accepted and celebrated behavior. It is a confusing time, and has been so for years and years as the dominant cultural narrative has shifted more and more towards the trembling might and fury of feminism, which in turn opens the discourse for women to say whatever the hell they want about men, as long as it is in line with feminist thought and philosophy. At the same time, it closes the doors for men so that men cannot say anything about women, including what kind of woman they would like to settle down with. Men are not quote-unquote allowed sexual or romantic preferences, whereas women are, and any positive thing said about men must include women, otherwise it is perceived as a slight against women. Any positive things said about women need not include men, and any who say otherwise are labeled an incel by people who have no idea what incel means. There will be more on this later. Here ended part 5. Join me next week for part 6 of this never-ending rave and ramble. Thank you very much for watching. Here follows an outro most befitting a video of this nature, a blatant attempt at virtual panhandling. Should you wish to support this channel, as well as my blog and any further endeavors this strange path will take me on, there are a few ways you can do that. The easiest would be to like, share and subscribe, as well as clicking the sometimes functional notification bell. Having the message, such as it is, manspread and mansplained far and wide will do wonders. You could also support my rambling and barely contained insanity by buying my books, which are linked below. More books will be made available as time allows. I also have a Redbubble shop, linked below, where you can buy prints in various forms of some of the artwork presented in my videos. Or you can contact me through the contact form on my blog for original artwork, commissions or prints direct from the source, so to speak. Until next time, I am your humble bearded bard, Morea Legier, manspreading majestically beneath the steel sky of doom.